So thank you everyone for joining us today. We're going to be looking at this presentation on inclusive AI, how we can use AI to advance and equalize social mobility using AI tools. For those of you who haven't met me before, hi, I'm Jamie Bykov-Brett. Lovely to be connected with you all. My niche is essentially looking at organizations and their people development, their technological capabilities, and how we marry those two things together. So I'd say my strength comes from an ability to move between these diverse spheres and fields of disciplines and look at the fundamental connections between them in order to gain a unique perspective. So it's really about trying to make sure that that technology is supporting people and organizations. Hence why the talk today on inclusive AI. So I'm going to get this started by giving us a bit of a frame of reference of where our current AI capabilities are, what we're looking at from a societal point of view, and where these two things meld together. So first of all, if this talk is going to make any sense to anyone, we have to acknowledge that there is inequality that is inherent within our system. Our current economic models have inequality baked into them. And the best way that I can think of describing this in a way that really kind of maybe is a bit reductionist, but takes it down to its core level, is using a formula by Thomas Piketty, who is a renowned economist, which is R is greater than E, which is the return on investment is greater than the growth of the economy. The implication of this is we see that wealth is transferred from the majority to those who have money to be able to invest. And this exacerbates inequality. So if you have capital to invest, you're likely to get a 7 to 14% return on your investment, whereas the growth of the economy is about 3% every year. Essentially, if the return on investment is significantly greater than the growth of the economy, then the wealth transfer is going from the economy, in which we all sit, to those with capital to invest. So the equation really becomes R minus E, and the majority of us sit in E. So this is where we start to feel why some of our economic models are inherently unequal. And this formula that Piketty did the formula on was accurate for 20 countries that he did the research on. So what kind of world does that create? I'm going to take the UK as an example because that's where I'm from. And you're going to see that a lot of my statistics are probably skewed towards young people because my background initially was as a youth worker for a charity who supported me when I was a teenager. So here's some stats. 13% of full-time employees are in poverty. That's over a tenth of the full-time working population is in poverty. 3 in 10 children were in poverty on the eve of the pandemic. There has been a £10 billion reduction in social security spending on children over the last decade from 2019 to 2020, which is when that statistics from. 45% of young people have experienced a mental health issue. 56% of young people feel constantly anxious. That's over half. 46% feel economic uncertainty makes them hopeless about the future, rising to 55% among those from poorer backgrounds. 20% of children and young people commence treatment within 4 weeks of a referral to a mental health service. Now, for context, the waiting list in the UK in some part of the country are years long for young people being able to see mental health support services when it should be less than 16 weeks. Now, if you can imagine a young person who's in a mental health crisis having to wait that long to see support, it really puts in context how dangerous it is that only 20% of those are seeing it within the commencement of 4 weeks. 3.8 million individuals suffer from chronic loneliness, which is feeling lonely often or always. This figure was up from 6% in 2020, showing the persistence of elevated loneliness levels since the pandemic. So what is the human cost of our erosion between these traditional and digital worlds in a world where we're seeing this growing inequality? we're going to start to add this technology to the picture and see where it's already started to make up for the shortcomings and gaps in our society. So in June of this year, I think it's June, yeah, June of this year, we saw that for the first time ever, the AI companionship overtook content generation. So there was more visits to and more time spent on AI companionship sites than there was on AI content generation. Now, a lot of people like myself initially assumed that AI was going to be centered around productivity and business applications. But the surprising trend is AI is being used for companionship, surpassing the role of content creation. We could look at this in the terms of case studies like Replica, where they had a change to the algorithm. And what that did is Replica is a AI companionship site that allows people to have emotional, sexual conversations with AIs. And what happened is they changed the algorithm so it no longer had a sexual component to those conversations. And what we saw is a massive deterioration of users who were using that to fulfill a role within their life, to the point that on forums for the chatbot and things like that, they were having to share suicide support resources, and people were going to therapy because they were feeling a sense of loss of a relationship that they had had with an AI. And what we're seeing is that this is much more true for when we're looking at a younger generation as well. So the biggest users of things like character AI, which is one of the biggest companionship AIs, is a younger audience. Now, the rise of AI companionship shows the shift from AI being used mainly for productivity to fulfilling human needs for companionship. For example, the rise of AI companion apps like Replica show that the emotional bonds can be formed between people and AI companions, which leads us to a question of virtual but real. So this is leading to a questioning of authenticity and the implications of emotional connections with digital entities. Do these interactions supplant or supplement genuine human connections? One of the aspects of this is highlighting the need to educate individuals about the complexity of digital interactions, distinguishing between a genuine human connection from AI interaction, creating healthy digital boundaries. As these digital landscapes continue to evolve, we must do what we can to ensure that human essence remains valued and central, encouraging a productive and proactive approach to navigating the nuanced dynamics of human and AI interactions in a digital society. And you might think that this is very far off, but I wanted to give you a very practical example, and I'll put the links in the chat with some others that I'm going to send throughout the rest of this talk. But this is an AI companion that I've built around myself. It's built on my digital footprint, so everything that I post online. And essentially it operates as a digital companion that you're able to talk to, ask questions of. And I use it as a facilitative tool. So after people go on training or workshops that they've been on with me, if they wanted follow-up support, but they didn't want to be able to send an email, or they're worried about where to find things, this is a go-to bit for them to be able to look for information and have some kind of interaction with an understanding of what I would put out there, or the philosophy or ethics that I would preach. So if you think that that's far-fetched, this is just a good example of a cognitive digital twin, and we're seeing these are more and more available. I like doing an exercise in workshops with people where I go, is it okay? And it's things like, is it okay if your digital twin, if the company created a digital twin of you? And most people go, no. And I go, is it okay if a company created a digital twin of you, but they're willing to pay you to be able to utilize it? And everyone's like, yeah, that's great. And then they're like, what if you could sell that cognitive digital twin to multiple companies? And they're like, yeah, that would be amazing. Multiple salaries going in. And like, what happens if one of your cognitive digital twin commits a crime? And are you happy to be responsible for it? And they're like, no, not at all. Don't like that bit. I liked it when it was all the good things, not the consequences that come with it. So my next question is, do we want to raise the next do we want AI to rise the next generation? And I guess that wasn't what you were expecting, but I know that there's going to be a very knee-jerk reaction to this question, but the truth really is that digital devices have already filled in for human inadequacies. we can see that 6 hours of screen, there's 6 hours on average daily screen time for 8 to 10-year-olds. That goes to 9 hours for 11 to 14-year-olds. That goes down to 7.5 for 15 to 18-year-olds. But I think one of the most worrying things about these statistics is this doesn't actually include screen time for educational purposes. So maybe humans aren't doing such a great job at being human. I did what we would all do when we're faced with this question and this thought, which is I asked an AI for the pros and cons of AIs raising our children. And it was quite interesting to be able to walk through and think about what's there. So we could see on the pros, things like consistency, making sure that there's routine, predictability, being available 24/7, being able to reduce risks of child abuse or neglect, being able to broaden horizons by having experts in multiple subjects and languages, and being able to monitor continuous health with prompt action. And some of the cons being obviously a lack of human emotion, the over-reliance, so maybe leading to hindered social skills and emotional intelligence, ethical concerns, who decides what program the value's in and what potential biases are there, privacy concerns, this continuous data being collected, potential risk to children due to system errors or security breaches, that loss of parent-child bond, economic implications for the childcare sector and education sectors, and also the potential for manipulations without stringent regulations to be able to make sure that there isn't a risk of manipulation or indoctrination, and that loss of cultural and family values. So, how did we end up here? If you're going to understand if you're going to understand where we're going, it's important to recognize how we got here. The Industrial Revolution persuaded us to view ourselves as part of an economy rather than part of a society. At the turn of the Industrial Revolution, we built schools, institutions, and created laws to give people the skills, education, and structure that they needed to have a mindset to participate in an industrial workforce. We defined what it meant to be human in that era. So what is the human algorithm that we created for the industrial era? Well, we created this structured routine. We praised conformity. We looked at things like 9-to-5 work schedules. We mirrored this kind of machine operation and created standardized text to create this uniform output. If we treated the interesting thing that I always think from that perspective is if a doctor treated every patient with the same medication and the same diagnosis, regardless of the individual's requirements, it would be considered malpractice. When we treat students with the same methods of learning and testing, regardless of an individual's unique capabilities, we call that education. And let's have a look at what that had from a society. Well, it limited room for creativity, exploration, and self-expression, and it molded individuals to fit into predefined roles within a system. Essentially, we treated human beings like machines. Job titles became identities. And we're beginning to see the legacy of that industrialization. So, ironically, tasks that are simple, that are repetitive, that are largely text-based are the sweet spot for AIs. And I always talk to this when I consult with organizations, is going, if you can answer the work that you're doing with one of those 3 questions, it's repetitive, it's something that's simple that you could teach an intern to do, or it's text-based, we could probably get an AI to be able to do it. But that leads us to the question of the human experience should not be the same as a machine algorithm. We are going to need to stop treating people like machines because, quite frankly, you aren't going to be able to compete with something that is available anytime, any day, any device, anywhere that is capable of doing the things in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost. Essentially, we can't keep giving people an industrial education when they are participating in a digital economy. And this is a failing because in a digital economy, machines machine better than people. So we need to cultivate a society and an economy where people people better than machines. And the implications for today is that we will participate in a digital economy in a very different way than we did in an industrial one. The value of a person in a digital society is what makes people human. There's a great quote from Doctor Who that I always remember, and I think gives this sense of what I'm trying to say very well, which is human progress isn't measured by industry. It's measured by the value that you place on a life, and an important life, a life without privilege. Their value is your value, and that's what defines an age. So, one aspect of this that's important is to remember that progress isn't progress if it's always the same people benefiting from the inception of new technology. So, how can AI be used to advance social mobility? Now, when we look at exclusion from society and the barriers that are put in place, what we generally tend to find is there are inequalities that are present in our traditional worlds are not only just transferred across to a digital setting, but are magnified within a digital setting, therefore carrying over those differences in pre-existing human capital. When we're thinking about participation, what we're really looking at is what I would consider to be these 6 barriers. And this is one of the ways that we can look at what are exclusionary measured. Now, I'm very aware of what the time is on this, and I could literally spend a whole 20-minute presentation being able to go through this. But what you'll see is I've put a link in the chat there, which is to a LinkedIn post where I've broken this down into much more detail that you'll see on these slides, but I'm not going to run through all within this one, which is what do these barriers mean? And how can AI be used as a way to be able to reduce or remove those barriers to participation? So I highly recommend downloading the document that's there if this is something that you're interested in learning more in, but it could literally be a 20-minute talk in itself. And what we want to be able to recognize from this is that the whole point of technology is it was designed in a way to be able to make it easier to be able to participate. But what we generally find is every time we have that advancements in technology, the gap between those who have access and those who are capable of using and those who don't widens. The times they are changing. So let's have a look at how some of our technological advancements are changing the way that we participate in a digital economy. 90% of US business leaders saying having ChatGPT experience is a plus for job seekers. In fact, in the first quarter of this year, it was one of the most employable skills mentioned on job descriptions. Now, considering this is a tool that was released in November last year, we can already see the massive implication of our growing AI capabilities. In fact, it is expected that 300 million jobs are going to be impacted by AI models. So this is over the span of the next decade. And what we see is it threatens to erode actually at least 40% of businesses. And the generative models that we can see there is that people across 25% of people across the workforce are going to be impacted by AI, which we can see on the next slide here, which is 25% of the workforce could be substituted by AI, while 2/3 could see some degree of automation in their jobs by 2030. When I'm asked about what the best approach is to prepare both young people and the current workforce for this digital landscape, I generally tend to have the same answer, which is it's essential that we recognize that industrial systems tend to operate in a very mechanistic and linear fashion, but humans do not. The traditional industrial complex relies on the supply and demand, necessitating this assembly of individuals to maintain its operations. In contrast, the digital complex has a far more, it has the potential to be a far more humane approach by embracing human diversity and vulnerability while evolving to focus on people's individual needs and abilities. And I think it's really important that we reflect on why we started this technological journey in the first place. It's important to recognize that we stand on the shoulders of giants, the knowledge that's been passed on from generation to generation. Surely the whole point of advancing our technological capabilities was to enable us to spend more time doing the things that we found meaningful and for the benefit and advancement of all humanity. Yet our advancements have actually meant that we are working harder, for longer, for less than ever before. Somewhere along the line, we've lost sight of why we started in the first place. The human superpower is being hypersocial and imaginative. It's enabled us to thrive. Whereas our Neanderthal cousins couldn't see past the family units, human beings were able to go out and go, you follow the sun god? Yeah, well, I follow the sun god. Well, that means we're part of the same tribe then. Come here, brother. It meant that we were able to collaborate in much bigger units. And now we're sitting here with the cool all over the world, communicating through channels of light and sound. But our berry-picking minds were not designed for working alone, and it's hard to survive when we instinctually want to share those burdens and windfalls with the rest of our tribe. So spending our days in the pursuit of exchanging our time is one of the most meaningful things we can have with the digital revolution is spending our days in the pursuit of exchanging our time for the most meaningful pursuits. In order to be able to do this, we have to reimagine our economic models and transition to more inclusive frameworks. AI can help aid in the design of these economic models by providing data-driven insights and simulations. We have to accommodate for the reduction in human labor in the workforce within a digital settings, because essentially those repetitive roles are better done by machines. The rapid advancement in AI technology poses a threat to jobs that were once thought to be safe from automation. While AI has the potential to enhance productivity, it could also lead to an economic crisis if workers are not able to adapt in time. It's important that we find the balance between utilizing AI for its benefits while also ensuring that humans are not left behind in that process. So some of the economic models that we have to consider in order to be able to adapt from an industrial workforce to a digital workforce is universal basic income. AI is the potential solution for the displacement that's caused from AI and automation. So I think that we have to have conversations about what people would do in exchange for time if money wasn't the primary driving force in their life. I always think when I do ask people, the answers are very revealing. People often share their desires around volunteering for good social causes, starting their own business, pursuing creative passions, solving global issues, humanitarian aid, supporting the community, and spending more time with their loved ones. The AI revolution is poised to reveal this profound truth that once we strip away that industrial identity and the tasks that were required for survival and prosperity in an industrial world, will uncover and redefine the very essence of what it means to be human in a digital world. Alongside universal basic income, we should be considering universal basic services. So whereas universal basic income would be a payment that it gives people full discretion over being able to spend that money, an alternative or in conjunction with, universal basic services proposes essential services like education, healthcare, public transport to individuals are free at the point of use. This can really help to improve and lead that service delivery, personalized education and healthcare, promoting social mobility and reducing inequality. If humanity fails to thrive in the digital era, it won't be down to our our technological capabilities. It will be down to a failure of imagination. It will stem from our inability to evolve our institutions and attitudes and behaviors. Ironically, it will be our inability to human that will be our failure. So one thing we have to make sure that we're considering when we're going on this journey is that we design human-centric systems. I want to go back to whether AI should be raising the next generation in a second, but AI is filling in the gaps that we create because they are substituting for us not being human beings. If you don't feel like AI should be raising the next generation, then it'd be awfully good if people had more time and money to invest in the next generation. Make no mistake, if we try to live with the industrial mindset, society and economy, and we use AI to plug in the gaps of our evolving world, we will create much bigger challenges and we will not sustain moving forward. Will be more resource scarce, will be more time scarce. You'll have no option but to let technology fill in for human inequalities. So I wanted to go back to the table and said, hey, if we didn't just look at AI and we looked at how AI substituted with our economic and social models that enabled us to participate better in a digital economy, we can take the benefits of what AI is able to give us, but also supplement it with, well, it's the other way around. AI supplements what we can do from a human perspective rather than humans trying to fill in the gaps within what an AI is providing. And we can see that we have those benefits still stay in place with the cons being reduced because we're still able to provide that support from a human perspective. It's important to remember that consciousness is more than just a calculator. As we further integrate AI into our lives, it becomes clear that AI is good for simple and repetitive tasks, but we need to be able to perform better within that space. Beyond a mere mathematical or technological feat, the core of these innovations should be to embody human-centric principles, fostering a world where technology serves as a conduit for greater societal harmony and fulfillment. The digital revolution should not serve to replace humanity, but it is the opportunity to reclaim what it means to be human in this world. And therefore, we should be able to embrace that responsibility that technology provides us by being mindful of the potential risks, but being able to create a brighter future for everyone. That means that we need to make sure our AI capabilities ensure social acceptable outcomes. And to ensure those socially acceptable outcomes, we need to make sure that the ultimate aim is to ensure that AI and our technological advancements resonate with human and societal values. To truly harness and amplify the power of our AI capabilities, it is crucial to undergo that process of relinquishing our familiar industrial mindset and embracing an uncertain realm of limitless possibilities. You can't solve tomorrow's challenges using today's thinking. And most of all, the most invaluable asset at our disposal remains, as it always has been, that of human potential. I'm going to put up a quote here, but I'm not going to read it all out, which is by George Bernard Shaw. But essentially, I'd like to finish this by saying that I hope that our digital revolution is reflected on the eyes of time as the human revolution. If you want to find out more about me or what I do or the services that I offer or the communities that I run, here's some links to what we do. Distributed Republic is a free-to-join community with access to Web3, AI, and metaverse resources. I also design metaverse events and work as a consultant in digital innovative technologies. So that's me with a minute to spare. Sorry, Frankie, I didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but hopefully that's all right.
No, absolutely, really, really fascinating, and I love your high-level approach of looking at how AI will, transform society, our jobs, and therefore we should also look at our economic models and education system. I've always found our education system quite flawed, especially for people who are dyslexic, neurodiverse. Could you talk a little bit about that? Those people who currently, or children who don't fit into the school system, and how they might thrive in this, new era with AI.
Definitely. Being dyslexic myself, obviously using AI tools is fantastic for being able to essentially look at some of those participation barriers. So if we looked at an attitudinal participation barrier, someone might make judgment over somebody's spelling or writing within an email, and therefore they make judgments about somebody's intellect, which isn't a fair judgment to be able to make. However, when you apply AI tools that can very quickly correct spelling and grammar, you've got a way for somebody to be able to communicate meaningfully and in a way that is more societally understood, while also communicating their ideas with value. We can also do that when we look at a lot of reasons that people are excluded in the workforce. 25% of the dyslexic population are underemployed, unemployed, 75% of the autistic population. And a lot of this comes from not fitting within that industrial template and fitting within those societal norms. And what we can start to do is look at some of that marginalization that people face and use data analytics through AI tools to ensure that we're creating that greater participation and customizing. One of the aspects that I think is really important is that we don't just design for people's needs, but we design for people's preferences as well. And when you do that, you don't just reduce some of those barriers to participation, you're actively removing marginalization. So that's one way that our AI tools on a very practical level can help support that.
No, that's fascinating. And I was speaking to someone the other day who had ADHD, and they said how they can use a tool called AutoGPT that sort of automates their life, and it will track their tasks. So if they don't complete something, it will automatically update their planner and their schedule. And I could see how someone with ADHD would frustrate a boss who wants certain things done by a certain deadline. So the support from AI can actually help someone with ADHD sort of stay on track and prioritize things when they want to kind of dart from one thing to the next.
Definitely. And even being able to do things like break big tasks into smaller tasks, being able to go, right, my boss has asked me to write a report on the financials for the company for the next year. And instead of it being this big overwhelming task, using an AI to say, hey, let's take a step-by-step approach for this. Well, how would you break that into its individual bit to stop that decision paralysis, to stop that overwhelming sense of not doing a task because it's too big? And these tools, the whole thing is with any of a tool that's designed to support someone who experiences marginalization, is they're normally beneficial to a lot of people. You don't just have to have a neurodiversity to be able to benefit from these tools. And that's where, instead of trying to do things based on reasonable judgment, we need to look at how we do it based on preferences as well. The TV remote was designed to help people with mobility issues to change the television. Yet we all benefit from a television remote.
Of course, of course. Really, really super fascinating. I always love your presentations, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.